This is CBN NewsWatch.
It is Monday, June 15th. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, more protests in the streets now over another shooting death of an unarmed black man, this time in Atlanta. We're going to tell you what happened and how it's putting more pressure on Washington to come up with a bill to reform America's police system. The controversy over bringing down statues across America, not only monuments to Confederate leaders, but even an abolitionist who opposed slavery. We're going to take a look at what's happening in this moment. And she went to a protest rally to pray with both police and the protesters. So why did this ordained minister later end up in handcuffs? And yesterday marked Flag Day in America. We're going to tell you why the flag is celebrated and what those red, white, and blue colors represent. We've got all those stories and much more ahead for you in this edition of CBN Newswatch. Want to begin this half hour with a protest taking to the streets yet again this weekend, but this time to protest the killing of a black man in Atlanta. Rayshard Brooks' death has been declared a homicide. The latest incident puts even more pressure on Congress and the president to act quickly to bring police reforms to America. Our Gary Lane is on this story.
Dramatic video shows the incident that led to the police shooting of Rayshard Brooks in Atlanta Friday night. Brooks had failed several sobriety tests outside a Wendy's restaurant. He resisted arrest and fled after seizing a police taser. An officer shot and killed him as he fled, pointing the taser in their direction. Brooks' wife says he wasn't dangerous.
I didn't know that I was going to wake up to my husband never coming home.
Protesters set fire to the Wendy's. Atlanta Police Chief Erica Shields resigned in the wake of the shooting. Police officer Garrett Rolfe was fired, and another officer was suspended. The Atlanta shooting gives a renewed sense of urgency to police reform legislation. Both Congress and the president are expected to act this week. Democrats are pushing to end qualified immunity, which shields officers like Rolfe from civil lawsuits.
We have to ask ourselves as a society, do we want to have a nation where police officers who do really awful things cannot be held accountable to civil rights charges?
But the president and other Republicans say qualified immunity is off the table. Senator Tim Scott calling it a poison pill that will kill police reform legislation.
That sends a wrong signal, perhaps the worst signal right now in America.
Scott has been working on police reform for 5 years. Republicans have tasked him with drafting a proposal in the Senate. Key points are improved officer training and greater transparency when wrongdoing occurs. Also, Scott and others support banning chokeholds.
That is one of the things that we should have engaged in a long time ago. Many departments around the country have already banned chokeholds, and I think a lot of other departments are increasing that now.
President Trump expected to sign an executive order this week setting a national standard for police. He agrees chokeholds should be banned except in certain situations.
But if a police officer is in a bad scuffle and he's got somebody,
well, if it's a one-on-one fight for the life,
yeah, and that does happen, and that does happen.
But
too. So you have to be careful. With that being said, it would be, I think, a very good thing that, generally speaking, it should be ended.
Ben Carson, Trump's only black cabinet member, says it's time for Americans to come together and calmly share their multiple perspectives.
We have to stop putting everything into the arena of combat. And let's see if we can find a way to work together, because if we don't, we're doomed.
And some rays of hope, healing, and grace. Amazing Grace, shared over the weekend in Nashville. These Christians took to song outside a nightclub recently looted by rioters.
Amazing grace, how sweet.
Gary Lane, CBN News.
A strong majority of Americans oppose the defund the police movement and some of its major goals, like cutting money from law enforcement to support other programs. That is according to an ABC News Ipsos poll. Overall, 64% say they oppose the defund the police movement, while 34% support it. However, 57% of black Americans do support the idea. Nearly 75% of white Americans are against it, and 57% of Hispanics oppose it as well. Polls show President Donald Trump trailing former Vice President Joe Biden, but that is not the way the Trump re-election campaign sees it. They're looking for an easy re-election victory. Politico interviewed more than 50 state, district, and county Republican Party chairs. The site reports the political landscape for the president is now worse than 6 months ago, and maybe even a little better. Politico says, according to this view, The coronavirus is on its way out and the economy is coming back. Polls are unreliable. Joe Biden is too frail to last and the media still doesn't get it. One Republican chairman in North Carolina says, quote, "We're thinking landslide." City leaders in Birmingham, Alabama recently revoked the lease of an area megachurch after a local high school teacher complained about Pastor Chris Hodges liking some conservative tweets. The teacher said she wasn't saying the pastor was a racist, but he likes someone who posts things that don't seem culturally sensitive to her. Now the multiracial church of 60,000 has been blocked from holding its services at 2 area high schools. Hodges apologized for liking insensitive posts, saying he realized he hurt people and attacked racism in a sermon a week ago Sunday.
But let me just be very clear. Racism, bigotry, prejudice exists. It's real. And it's of the devil.
After the city's housing authority revoked the lease, Hodges thanked its commissioners for the opportunity they'd given the church to serve them. I want to turn now to Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Sunday the country is moving ahead with a new Jewish community in the Golan Heights named after President Donald Trump. It will be called Ramat Trump, which is Hebrew for Trump Heights, and it will be home to 300 families. Israel recaptured the Golan Heights from Syria during the 1967 Six-Day War. Most of the international community considers it to be occupied by Israel. But the Trump administration said in March of last year, the U.S. recognized it as under Israeli sovereignty. Netanyahu's announcement Sunday came on the president's 74th birthday. Coming up, as many protests have turned violent in recent days, some statues in different cities have been torn down of Confederate leaders, Christopher Columbus, and even an abolitionist. We're going to take a look at all of this when we come back.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline, Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Get the top political news and analysis from Washington on Faith Nation, tonight at 6 Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel.
Some protests over racial injustice have ended in statues being defaced and forcibly or otherwise taken down across the nation. Mark Martin spoke with Dan Andros about those actions and even some attacks on statues that don't seem to make sense, like one of a Philadelphia area abolitionist.
Dan, we've all seen the images of statues coming down in several states. What's the good and the bad with this?
Yeah, well, there's really not much good to speak of here. This is a movement now to just sort of erase faces from history. One of the big ones that's going on right now, we've seen in Boston and in Philadelphia, the cities actually removing statues of Christopher Columbus as a popular target. So this is a movement now. If it's not being torn down, they're being defaced. To sort of take a look back at people in history and just try to kind of cancel them right out of there and pretend like they didn't exist.
There was even the statue of an abolitionist being defaced with graffiti. Why this was someone who stood against slavery?
That's a really good question, and I don't know if there's a really good answer to it. But this happened in Philadelphia, and it was a statue of Matthias Baldwin, who was an early abolitionist who worked for about 30 years to end slavery and abolish it before it actually finally happened. Now, his story is they were calling him a colonizer and a murderer on the actual statue. And when you look at this man's life, he was an entrepreneur. He was very successful, and he actually used his own funding to educate black children. He was very passionate about this issue, and it seems like in a time where slavery was ingrained in society, that this was one of the guys who was a visionary and a leader in this movement. So it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense at all that this statue would be targeted. It really just kind of indicates that maybe these people have actually no idea who was on this statue at all.
Is Antifa involved with this? I mean, with this just being another act to stir up trouble, is Antifa involved in all of this?
Well, that's what the local news are reporting, that this was Antifa, which would make a lot of sense because, honestly, what Antifa does, there's really not much sense in any of what Antifa does. So that would fit the MO right here when you're defacing an abolitionist, when you're trying to make a point about racism, which makes absolutely zero sense. So that's what the local press is reporting, and that would actually make sense in this case.
Our founding fathers, Dan, they lived during the time of American history where there was slavery and then there was the Civil War. What is important for all Americans to know about our history here and to remember when it comes to these men in these times and even these monuments?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things to remember is if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. And so it was a very complicated time. I mean, I think it's very easy to look back at all of the people who were involved in slavery some way and say, like, well, gee, that was wrong. Like, let's delete them all. And so the problem with that is since it was so ingrained in our society, if you want to delete everyone that had anything to do with slavery at all in relation to the founding of this country, well, then you may as well just delete all of the history books and pick a new date to start history teaching, some arbitrary date, around 1900 or something, or whenever you think things got better, maybe after the civil rights, movement. But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to just sit there and try to delete and erase all of the things from history. We don't have to like every single thing that happened. Certainly slavery was a stain on America in our early founding. But as you mentioned, the Civil War happened. We moved in the right direction. Eventually it ended. And that struggle still goes today, where we're fighting to try to end racism. But the truth of the matter is it's a complicated issue. And to sit there and try to erase it all is not very helpful. And I think in the long run, we'll actually have the unintended consequence of causing people to forget history. And eventually, as the saying goes, we'll be doomed to repeat it.
Dan, these difficult times are disturbing. What is at stake here for our nation spiritually as we see all this anger, hate, and the need on all sides to come together in unity and love? Talk about the need for all sides to come together in unity and love.
Yeah, well, I think the problem here is that we are losing the ability to talk to one another and to think rationally about issues and to really disagree with people and still love them at the end of the day. I mean, we're really having this direction that we're heading in, where we sort of put people in a category, we put them in a box, and if they don't agree with the thing that we agree with, then we want to just move them and remove them from any debate or conversation. And that's just not how God would want us to treat people. And really, actually, if you look at it, it's kind of bullying is essentially what it is. It's if you don't agree with me, well, we are going to just erase you from society. We're going to get you canned from your job. We're going to cancel your show, all of these other things. And so that's just not the way that, God would want us to interact with one another. We want to respect people even when we disagree with them. And you just can't do that in a cancel culture that wants to delete everything.
Dan, would you pray for our nation now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this time, for these, words that we get to discuss here and look at your truths, because you would want us to love one another, and it's very difficult to do in this time, Lord Jesus. So we would just ask that you would help us love one another well, that we would hear other people, that we would listen to them, but not seek to fear or bully people out of the conversation. That's not what you would have us do. So help us, Lord, to interact with one another as we go forward, and let's be a light, and let's draw people towards you with the gospel message, and ultimately, hopefully, draw more people to salvation through your name. And Jesus, it's in your name that we pray all these things. Amen.
Amen. All right. Dan Andros with faithwire.com. Thanks for your time and insights and your prayer, Dan.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Tonight on FaithWire, a look at cancel culture. We're going to explain what it is and why it could threaten the very core of America's freedoms. All of that and more on Faith versus Culture with Dale Partridge and Dan Andros tonight at 9:30 Eastern. You can find that on the CBN News Channel. Still ahead, a minister felt a divine call to join a group of about 400 protesters in Jacksonville, Florida, to pray for both the protesters and the police, and she encouraged protesters to march in peace. But afterward, she ended up in handcuffs. We're going to tell you what happened when we come back.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
A Jacksonville, Florida demonstration against racism started out peacefully enough, but how did a preacher who went to pray end up in handcuffs? Our Charlene Aaron has a look.
We've all seen the protests and riots resulting from George Floyd's death at the hands of Minneapolis police. Dr. Delane Smith, an ordained minister and retired real estate investigator, felt a divine call to join a rally of about 400 protesters recently at the Duval County Courthouse in Jacksonville.
God speaks to me. He said, daughter, I want you to go to the courthouse to pray.
Prayers extended to both protesters and police.
So, Father God, touch our mayor right now. I get there, I take a selfie with one of the officers, and then I pray for 3 of the other officers. I pray for them and offer them water.
Smith also urged protesters, mostly millennials, to march in peace.
You're not going to break anything. No, ma'am. I felt like it was my duty to take a stand. I don't know where the strength comes from, But I stood and I said, no, we don't burn cities. We don't burn buildings. We don't destroy property.
But we're going to destroy racism.
Smith remained on the steps of the courthouse while protesters took to the sidewalks. She later heard an officer demanding protesters leave.
So I leave the steps of the courthouse. I walk into the street where the officer is. I said, sir, may I please have clarity? That's on my video. Why are they being asked to disperse? He said, because I said it's over and it is a legal gathering.
In an effort to keep tensions low, Smith, who streamed the event live on Facebook, can be seen telling the crowd to go home. Police in riot gear warning the crowd to disband. Those who didn't were arrested, including Smith.
You're not under arrest. And he pointed to one of the officers. He said, arrest her. He put Ziploc handcuffs on my hand behind me. I was so speechless. I said, are you kidding me? I am the one that has controlled this crowd. I am the one.
According to local news outlets, police felt the crowd had become confrontational, with things being thrown. Smith and several others waited 2 hours in a police van before being taken to jail for a night on an unpadded bed. She was bailed out the next day, and all charges have been dropped. While spending that night behind bars was no pleasant experience, Smith believes in some way her prayers made a difference.
Actually, I'm not bitter. I think I'm better. Because as a preacher and as a minister of God, you know, we are so busy going to church that we forget to do ministry. And what God did was he gave me my compassion back. I just heard God say that I was manifested peace. I am so grateful that God chose to use me.
I declare a spirit of peace.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Coming up, Sunday marked Flag Day in America, but do you know what those red, white, and blue colors stand for? We're going to show you in our report from the home of the woman who's known for sewing the first American flag, Betsy Ross. We're going to have that story when we come back.
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faith Wire, Monday night at 9:30. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Watch The Global Lane, Thursday night at 9:30.
It has the power to influence weight loss, boost your immune system, and improve brain function.
We've seen an explosion of data on the role of the gut microbiome in health.
The free Build a Better Gut booklet reveals the latest information about the gut microbiome. You'll discover how your gut affects the rest of your health.
The gut microbiome has been linked to depression and cancer and heart disease.
Learn how to build a stronger, healthier gut.
The microbiome, if it's in good composition, are really protecting us all the time from more invasive things.
Get the Build a Better Gut booklet, free from the Christian Broadcasting Network. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut.
You need to make sure that your microbes are working with you, not against you.
And if you order online, you'll get immediate access to the Build a Better Gut series, a digital copy of the booklet, and related bonus material. Build a Better Gut today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut for your free copy.
Check out the CBN News Daily Rundown podcast each weekday with me, Caitlin Burke. Click on the show tab at cbnnews.com where you can listen and subscribe.
Yesterday marked Flag Day, a day set aside to celebrate the red, white, and the blue. During these days, it's important to know why the flag is celebrated and what those colors represent. Paul Strand joined a leading American historian to find out at the house of Betsy Ross.
Betsy Ross, who lived and died here in Philadelphia, will always be remembered for sewing the first American flag.
When you stand in front of the Betsy Ross house, you're seeing a single mom doing something to take care of her family.
By age 30, Ross had become a widow, not once but twice.
And now she here is trying to care for her children. She was a seamstress and an upholsterer.
The founding fathers had worked on a design and colors for the first flag to represent their soon-to-be free nation. Each color meant something special.
Red stands for hardiness and valor. We're going to be people that are strong and brave. White, purity and innocence. When's the last time you heard anybody in the government say we need to be a pure nation? That's moral purity and legal innocence. We don't break the law and we're pure before God. That's what white means. And then when we look at blue, it's perseverance, vigilance, and justice. We will not give up. As it has been said, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. We persevere in what's right. That's what the colors mean, red, white, and blue.
Now these founders needed someone to sew their flag. George Washington knew Betsy from Christ Church near her house.
They come and they say to single mom Betsy Ross, we need lots of flags and we'd like to have lots of stars and we want them to have 6 points.
Betsy pointed out those are complicated to cut.
And then she took a piece of cloth, folded it, and with a snip came up a 5-pointed star. She said, if you do this, you save a lot of money and a lot of time. They said, it's a deal. And so Betsy Ross is the one who gives us the 5-pointed star that's famous all over the world, the American star.
Betsy Ross didn't sew just the first American flag. She went on sewing flags for the U.S. government for more than 50 years.
Right here, where this gravestone by the house memorializes her and her unique contribution to America's great symbol.
So I like to say that our story of whatever we do includes the moms and the ladies.
A point Abigail Adams made to her husband and founding father, John Adams.
She said, don't forget the ladies. And so here's an occasion to say thank God for the ladies who have done a lot to make our nation great.
Paul Strand reporting from the Betsy Ross House in Philadelphia.
Time now for your Monday motivation, and today I leave you with this thought. God is alive and well, and His word will work for you. Trust Him, believe in Him, and speak His word. I promise you, He never disappoints. With that word, make this a marvelous Monday. That is a wrap for this edition of CBN News Watch. Thank you for watching. Remember, you can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel, and you can find them anytime there. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us. The address is right there on the screen, newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.